Hiya, and welcome back to Outriders. Today we're going to be talking about the Trickster and the journey to make him from okay, kind of getting by, to actually really good, one-hitting things and getting to endgame. Now, there's of course many builds, especially with the induction of taking away timers to endgame. Now there's a little bit more variability, but still be careful because there's not that much. You'll still need an absolutely demonstrous amount of damage as well as a ton of weird, like either tricks or survivability. But usually they're tricks to get you survivability and an abundance of damage. We'll talk about that in a second. But one of the things I desperately wanted when it comes to progressing in Outriders is knowing exactly what I need to look out for, the things that are my keys to power, the keys to giant jumps, leaping to endgame instead of having to be in this weird testing stuff kind of phase, which is quite messy. So today we're going to be answering the question, how do you progress in Outriders with the Trickster? Specifically, progress to endgame, to World Tier 15, getting all the juicy tidbits and lovely supply drops and all these things. Also getting a lot of cool legendary weapons and all of that. Okay, so there's some bad news. Real bad news. Okay, so essentially, the whole weapon thing. There's a lot of fun weapons in Outriders, but most of them can't survive endgame, so it's quite shitty. But is what it is. So first things first, if you are a new player who just got to endgame and is wondering how the hell you progress, let's start there. You have two ways of attaining legendaries and etc. At first, the way that is easily and the most viable for you is Santiago. Santiago becomes available, and he used to not really have a point, but then they updated the game and gave him a pretty big reason for existing. And that is essentially this right here, re-rolling. Now, you guys can see that it costs me an absolute abundance of drop pod resources to re-roll. But Santiago is optimized for where you currently are. And that is good and bad. It's bad because there's never really like an abundance to gain. Like Santiago is going to be always kind of expensive for you to re-roll his entire stock. We'll get into why you want to re-roll his stock is because there's very specific legendaries that are your keys to power and your keys to massive progression, or just chipping away at your armor build in the downtime of you actually hoping to get a legendary drop that actually works for you. All you need to know is that Santiago will grow with you, and that's not good because he'll ask for more and more drop pod resources, but the good news is that you're going to be getting more and more drop pod resources every single time you increase your world tier. So every time if you go from like 9 to 15, you're not going to get that many legendaries at 9, and honestly, if you can make it to like 12 to 14, 13, something like that, you get a lot of legendary. That's about as good as you can get. Point being is this is a huge resource that you are going to need to leverage to your advantage in order to progress faster in Outriders. We'll go into the specifics of why in a hot minute. Then the other way you progress in Outriders is just by doing this and getting good drops. So again, if we go to any one of these, you guys can see that now if we scale down the thing, we are changing the drop chances that we get. At first, you just can do epics, and then eventually you're going to have a tiny chance of getting legendaries, but you're getting drop pod resources. Again, be careful on going to the very, very max. So say if you're like at world tier and like this is the highest you can go to, be careful doing that one if it's really, really grindy for you to do. The reason why is because when you do it, the whole game will shift to you being able to do that. So if it's really hard for you to do that and you barely got out of there with your ass intact, then that's not good, because then you're going to have to always have that experience and that close call every single time. When, again, there are certain legendaries that will take you home. And again, every single time you increase your world level, generally, Santiago will ask for the highest possible tier of drop pod resources given your highest possible point of progression. So be careful with progressing too quickly, because you might neuter yourself for Santiago's potency, essentially. Now that's essentially how you gain power, and that is endgame. But how do you specifically as a Technomancer actually evolve, become stronger, and what are you looking for? Well, essentially, I would highly advise you guys dip your toe into the rabbit hole, YouTube rabbit hole specifically, and see what the endgame-ish builds are going, or happening, etc. So, essentially, the two builds that I've really seen that really can like hold their own at endgame is these two builds, specifically functioning around this specific set bonus, legendary set bonus kind of thing, which is as long as an enemy is frozen, you're dealing 90% more damage. And let's just throw in 10% more crit chance whenever you activate Cold Snap. goddamn, that's a really good, easy win. Amazing. It's a really strong set bonus. And also, you have stuff like this, which is when you kill an enemy that is frozen, you're dealing 250 AoE damage in a radius. It's huge, working with the 90% damage bonus that you're essentially having. The other build I've seen, which is more the anomaly side of things, so typically when it comes to endgame builds, there's two routes you can go: firepower or anomaly damage, which is basically weapons or powers. And both kind of have a really like set in stone kind of build. So for instance, if you go with the power option, skill cooldown is amazing, skill life leech is also amazing. Things like that are kind of set in stone. Status power is always just good across the board usually. Just usually buffs up your damage given you're doing a lot of elemental damage, so it's just good. Regardless, the other build that I've seen, which is Tools of Destruction, essentially. So it's like your ability to summon forth a turret, a bazooka, or whatever, and just wreck shit. I will say this build for the Trickster I've seen, and it's awesome, but it seems to be way more like hindered on things like this. So it's 3-star like legendary mod. So if you're trying to build like power, you're gonna probably have to get a lot more legendaries and kind of grind in the Santiago hope, or even just luck out and getting a legendary hat that's this set bonus, because the 3-star mods that come with legendaries that you're gonna need to break down and put into other 3-star mods, when you have the bazooka or minigun with the Tools of Destruction activated, and you hit someone with the pain launcher, there's a 20% chance for you to refund both the minigun and the RPG, which is insane, especially considering there's a legendary mod right here. Increases pain launcher's number of rockets by 10. So you're getting an extra 10 volleys of rockets. So sure as shit, the 1,000 of rockets flying out of pain launcher on top of the 10 that now you're adding to it, one of those is going to hit and reset your entire magazine, which is lovely. Albeit pain launcher can sometimes whiff, but still, just aim for not that and you'll be okay. Or just rock the minigun and you'll have an endless clip and you'll be pretty good to go. Now, I don't know too much about this build, but if you look at the base stats, anomaly power is what you're going to want, skill life leech to keep your ass alive and in the fight, cooldown reduction will be amazing, just so if you do fuck up and don't hit pain launcher, or you can cast pain launcher again, you'll be able to get your powers. Anyways, so those are the two builds that seem to be very optimal in endgame, because they're just giving you essentially a way more damage application and stuff like that. Okay, one more thing before we kind of get into the specific like leaps and bounds, huge jumps within your power. Yes, your set bonus is huge. Again, 90% more damage is nuts. Just if an enemy is frozen, and it's pretty easy to make people cold, whether that's with your turret augment or whatever. But the one thing that you are going to need to do, and it's a little frustrating at the beginning, but essentially when you are just starting out, you're going to have to look through all of the blue armor that you have, specifically for high value stats that you are going to use. I know it's a lot, but it's actually really good. This doesn't matter as much when you're just getting into the game, and when maybe you just got to endgame. But the more you progress into endgame, the only way you're going to be able to deal like 1,000,000 damage every shot, or just a stupid amount of damage every shot, you are going to need to leverage every tiny minuscule stack in your favor. So that's just, you gotta bite that. It's annoying, it's frustrating, it's sometimes meticulous and yeah, but yeah. So what are the high value stats for the build where you do a lot of firepower damage, shooting enemies that are weakened with frozen? Well, it's firepower, cooldown reduction, and skill life leech, or status power. So those are the 4 like things that are amazing. Skill life leech, it's not needed, but it's nice because you have your turret always up and it's always spewing out stuff, so your health is always going to zap all the way back up. So just something to consider with that. But yes, those are the stats you're going to look for. And again, if you have an anomaly build, think of what you always will need: anomaly power or firepower. You have to pick one and fully send it, unless you have some sort of weird other build that requires a different stat. But usually that's how it plays. Anyways, firepower or anomaly power. If I was going for an anomaly build, the stats that would make the most sense to me is anomaly power, cooldown reduction, skill life leech, or status power. It'd be the same thing, more or less, except again, status power is really good because it's just going to up your damage when it comes to your elemental effects. So if you're a pyro person, this is going to be huge. We're doing corrosive, freeze, and all kinds of a mess. So yeah, it's very good in that regard too. Anyways, we're getting caught up in the minutia, but that is what you're going to need to look for. The sooner you can like write down those stats, and if you check an armor piece and it has like one of the 2 of those things, then good. Now you're going to make a giant jump. but you will have to invest in those at some point. But be careful, because you want to invest in them to where you can be satisfied and be happy, but maybe not fully invest in them. So right here, we have a helmet and it's level 48. So what we can do is we can level this thing up, which is amazing. That will increase its score, but what it will also do is nerf these things down if we leveled them up. So the same stats that we're looking to increase, we can actually raise those based on breaking down the same like armor with the same prefix. So if you break down a lot of armor with this kind of like diamond beside firepower, it's going to give you the firepower shards, so you can put them in to your ideal gear and then progress forward with this. Now you want to do this, which is really nice, but eventually you're going to hit a wall where you're going to need to level up your gear to level 50 or just get new gear. It's kind of a debate whether you want to just kind of wait until you get like the best gear, or just say fuck it and kind of constantly keep shifting and just change out mods because it's cheaper. It depends on if you really want to look. Eventually you're going to get annoyed by looking at all of the loot you ever have and all of the priorities and all of the mods and all the stats. It gets to be a lot. Anyways, so do whatever you need to do to get to endgame. Fuck what people say, including me. Okay? But this is what I've learned. So yes, you do need to level these up, and that will make a very big difference in terms of just giving you more firepower, which will equal out into you dealing more damage. Anyways, so that's all good and fine. You can maybe find like the best armor in general and just chip away at leveling that up and then reinvesting in the stats. But unfortunately, that's not enough. Because the end game, and this is kind of to me a problem in Outriders, it's silly. Like, you need to do a stupid amount of damage, and if you get hit once, you'll die. Like, it's Outriders is a weird looter shooter that takes itself pretty goddamn seriously. It's like you're playing esports, Overwatch, focus level shit. It's definitely a game for people who like to go hard and invest a ton, and to have an end game that wants to rip your goddamn balls off. It's horrible. But with that being said, you can make it, albeit a timely endeavor. Although just take your time, and I think you'll be okay. Regardless, one of the keys to power is just that. Make sure you have at the very least firepower bonus if whatever build you've chosen to do is centered around fire or guns, essentially. If you love using powers, then go anomaly damage and cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction becomes really apparent because you need to keep casting those abilities, because that's where your damage is coming from. Now, let's talk about Santiago. So whilst you're just running things, and eventually you're going to get blues, purples, and maybe even a legendary every now and again, you're going to be building up your drop pod resources, and you're going to be coming here and re-rolling it. Now, why are you going to be doing that, you could be asking? Because this, unfortunately, is almost what you need. So this is called Fatal Symbiote. I think Symbiote, something. Venom, all that stuff. Anyway, but it's called Dark Sacrifice. What this does is insane. Essentially, it says during combat, your weapon will drain your HP up to 50% of your HP, of your max HP, in exchange for 75% weapon damage. What? This is you require 3 legendary pieces of gear just to activate this, which is 90%. That's a little bit away from the fucking big pooba of Dark Sack. It's insane. Anyways, and if you're worried about like dying, it goes super slow. You lose a lot of health, and then all you really need is like 1 armor piece with skill life leech or weapon life leech or whatever to heal the damage, essentially. So I would highly advise you roll for Santiago, reroll, keep grinding, reroll, and eventually, hopefully, you're gonna get Fatal Symbiote or Dark Sacrifice. You're gonna take this weapon, break it down, because its base stats are shitty. Break it down, you're gonna have the mod forever, and then you're going to reinvest it in your whatever weapon is high base damage, you like the feel of it, whatever. This is a weapon that is a part of the starter pack kind of bundle that makes you look like a biker. You can buy it. It's a little bit of money. It's like $9 or something like that. You don't have to if you don't want to, but it basically, there's a way to get like a perfect burst rifle that just has stupid scaling damage. And again, I wish it wasn't like this either. I wish you could have fun with all of these fun legendary weapons. It doesn't seem like the game is made to do that. If you want to play in 50, you have to like min-max every string of damage you can. It's a little shitty. I wish I could have fun and play with other weapons, honestly. But anyways, another like honorable mention that can give you a huge leaps and bounds just to get you participating in a little bit of endgame, maybe like 13, like word level 13. It's called Kill Spree. It's usually found, I think, in this weapon. Yeah, this is the weapon that if you ever find Amber Vault, it's worth buying this and breaking it down just to have Kill Spree. Kill Spree kind of does a similar thing, except you have to stack and get kills and have it like bulldoze, essentially. Also note, stacking Dark Sacrifice on Kill Spree doesn't make it like punch like a truck or something like that. Same thing, you can't put Dark Sacrifice on Amber Vault and think it's gonna like double up your damage a lot. It's not as good as you might think. Unfortunately, I wish it was. So those are 2 big keys to power. Just heavily invest, get armor that functions around whatever damage thing you're gonna do. Firepower and status power are just good damage. Long range damage and short range damage are good, but just not as much as having like 30% status power that's gonna chew through shit. Anyways, the other thing is Dark Sacrifice. I'm sorry, dude. 75% damage. Same thing with Kill Spree. It stacks up to about 75%. Weapon damage. Insane. Now, you might be like, but Grin, this is bullshit because I have an anomaly damage build. What am I doing? Like, do I just have a weapon that has like life leech on it or weapon life leech and I just kind of use it as a stat stick to heal? Yes. But also, and forgive me, I don't have the build, so I haven't been trying to hunt for it. But there is a shotgun. Maybe I can find a picture of it. I'll make it work for myself. But yeah, essentially it's a shotgun that everybody uses who has anomaly builds, and it basically converts your anomaly scaling to weapon damage. So if you're building like anomaly damage, skill power, cooldown, blah, 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 you're gonna have an insane anomaly stat, and it's gonna feed right directly into the shotgun, or feed directly into this weapon, which would also be good. Although Dark Sacrifice is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Yeah. Anyways, but yes, ladies and gentlemen. Also, just for like some minutia of this specific skill weirdness, if you guys do not know this, it's quite good. Just some like honorable mention mods. I think you can just deduct. Like, deal 25 more damage to toxic enemies. Okay, well, my build functions around always doing toxic damage. How do you always do toxic damage, Grin? Killing shots on enemies affected with toxin replenish 40% of your magazine. If you're always killing relatively quickly things that have toxic stat on them, you're essentially never having this skill on cooldown because you're always going to have toxic rounds within your gun. Be warned, whenever you break open a wall, you'll have to reactivate this, which is actually kind of a nice thing if you actually accidentally get too close to your magazine. There's also stuff like this. You mess up and you burn your whole clip, and you didn't kill anything in time enough to regenerate bullets into your magazine by killing someone who is affected by toxin, you are going to be able to have a do-over, essentially, which is quite nice. So that just intrinsically feeds within itself. Also, you guys might be saying, well, Grin, why aren't you using the cryo turret? What's with that? Well, unfortunately, there's this perk right here, which gives you 40% weapon damage whenever you activate a decay skill, which is basically blighted rounds, which you cannot activate that often, or the blighted turret. So you can't really use the cryo turret because you're losing on 40% damage, 40% weapon damage. Again, if you're playing the weird Tools of Destruction build, you're in a whole other ballpark. So yeah, you're probably in here somewhere. I can only comment on what I've been working towards, and no. OP thing, if I could honestly put anything that, like this, right, where I think it's my feet. Yeah, killing enemies while aiming down sights grants you 11,000 firepower for 20 seconds, and it stacks up to 3 times. So that's a shit ton of firepower just at the cuff. There's another perk that's like this. If I could get double of those, I'd be cooking, okay? But the ability to freeze an enemy so that I'm not getting my head smashed in is quite nice. So that perk, as much as it looks kind of samey, it's actually quite powerful and nice to have. So anyways, but yeah, 17k damage is honestly better than the toxin thing in a weird way, especially with it stacking so much. So as long as I'm aiming down sights, I'm getting a shit ton of armor with that perk. I'm also getting a shit ton of firepower that can all stack up to 3 times. And if I get a kill, I'm going to be getting even more firepower on top of all of that, which just allows you to do more damage. Now, before I leave you, I have one more thing that's just a fucking, god damn it, a nightmare. It's awful. It's the worst. But let me talk to you about it. Essentially, in Outriders, there's a huge issue where the end game requires you to do stupid amounts of damage, like just so much damage. that you kind of can't build other stats like HP. So even though there's no timer now, it doesn't matter because essentially you still need to, like, the enemies have so much health that you can't have, like, you can't be cute and be like, ooh, let me put on max HP. That's the only because this has a set bonus. Anyway, you can't do that because you can have like one perk that does that, sure, but it's just not a good idea to do that at all because you need high damage. So then that begs the question, well, then what do I do? Well, there's a couple of options. One of them is use skill life leech, and hopefully you have any ability that constantly does that. There's also bleed that I believe the Devastator has access to, so as long as an enemy's bleeding, you're essentially healing your ass up. And also when you're dealing damage, you're healing because the Technomancer and various different class heals, all that stuff. But in a weird way, again, specifically with this weird game, you're needing to do so much damage, and the moment that you start to divvy up power to like making yourself heal a lot more, you're starting to lose out on status and firepower. What are you gonna do? Maybe close range damage is no longer optimal, or long range damage is now gone because you've decided to maybe try to circumnavigate that and heal. Wrong. You can do that. It's just not gonna. You're not gonna be able to kill things. It sucks. So what you are gonna have to do is find a way to break the rules. I don't know if every class is like this. I feel like this may just be an annoying problem with the Technomancer. I don't know. Is the reason why this is so good, this perk, and this is why I think it just bodies Tools of Destruction build, it's because freeze. What does freeze do when it comes to your overall stats, status, and all that shit? The higher the status power that you build into your character, the longer the duration of freeze, ash, vulnerable, and weaken. Again, this is huge. This is huge, huge, huge. Having an enemy locked in means they cannot shoot you anymore. And if you happen to have an ability like Cold Snap, where you activate it and every enemy just gets locked down completely, that's amazing. But then you have a weird like abilities that don't really like give you context to what it does, which is this. Cold Snap increases the radius by 66%. What is 66% given the radius of this? I kind of don't know what that is. Maybe, I mean, they're pretty close. Who knows? This maps people. It's insane. It like quintuples its radius. It's silly. Again, go give some love to the Outriders community. Feed that beast because they've found the answers for you so that you can just cook on through. You don't have to sit there and be like, what? Anyway, but yes, builds that specifically circumnavigate a rule like, oh man, I keep dying, I should build HP, or I keep dying, I should build armor, or I keep dying, I should build a skill life leech or something, which is good to have a little bit of that, just to kind of circumnavigate getting one shot all the time. But you need to do such a high abundance of damage, so what's a way for you to have a high amount of damage, but also to not get hit a lot? You freeze the enemy down and lock them down in place, circumnavigating them hitting you, as well as just shitting on them with 90% more damage and crit chance to boot. Oh, and as far as like general builds, again, there's just like things if you look through your skill tree that kind of make sense. Again, having weapon life leech will help you not have to have so much of like life leech in your armor, which is nice, especially when it's 5%. It's pretty good, especially when you level up your like life leech in your armor. It only goes up by like, yeah, like this is maxed out. We get maybe 5%, so you're getting a lot out of your skill tree with that 5% weapon life leech. It's amazing. Then there's stuff like this that's a little hidden, which is every time you affect a toxin onto an enemy, which is Blighted Rounds, does toxin, the enemy gets a vulnerable stat. All right, it's kind of good. Vulnerable is not that good, but if you have this, which increases the potency of vulnerability, then now vulnerable is pretty good. Now it's worth getting. And then we have also this one, which increases your damage, but also increases your damage taken. This is weird. I don't notice me taking more damage. Again, it's really weird in Outriders. There's times when you're like face tanking a shit ton of enemies and you're doing okay. And then there's other times where somehow it seems, again, I say this a lot, but it almost seems like the enemy attacks you and like it clips through your body 6 times and just does like 80% more damage out of nowhere. It doesn't happen all the time. It's weird. It makes builds kind of odd. Like I had at one point a like resistant as hell tanky build for my Technomancer. It didn't work because I couldn't deal enough damage to climb, but I was pretty good at staying alive, and then randomly I'd still get beaten, then my head kicked in. Despite I had like so much lifesteal, I had my turrets firing, constantly healing me up. Weird shit in the game. Regardless, having more magazine size is always nice, especially if you rock Blighted Rounds. And of course, we have this, which is just going to give us 40% more weapon damage, just again giving us the more and more weapon damage, and you'll need all the weapon damage you can possibly get to make a dent at some of the enemies with like so much health that they have it in game. Quick recap of how the hell you get stronger in Outriders. Fully utilize Santiago to try to farm out and get high level armor essentially, but mainly blood sacrifice. Dark sacrifice. I always say blood sacrifice. Dark sacrifice, because it gives you 75% weapon damage, and the negative of health loss is not that bad. And again, if you just invest in the skill tree points, which give you weapon life leech, you're dealing a shit ton of weapon damage, you're gonna heal immediately. Yeah, farm out a specific artifact set that you're hunting specifically for. One myth that I thought, but is not the case, is that legendary armor stays the same regardless, besides mods. It will always have the 3-star mod at the very top, but the bottom one can change. But it will always have bonus firepower, status power, long range damage for this chest piece specifically. Unfortunately, it's shitty, honestly. I'd love to have firepower in the place of max health, but they're like, no, legendaries are somehow more boring than purples. What the fuck? Anyway, use Santiago and hope to you get like a drop whilst farming the expeditions for Dark Sacrifice, and hopefully get a couple set bonuses and they match, and now you're just cooking. In the meantime, before you get access to legendaries, hunt for high value stats that are relevant to whatever you like to do. If you like guns, build firepower, status power, and skill life leech, or a cooldown reduction, or whatever. Because you can also use a little bit of cooldown reduction given what you want. Anyway, with mine, it's Cold Snap is on a huge cooldown, so even though I'm not an anomaly, I can still use some cooldown reduction, so I can constantly Cold Snap people and save my ass whenever I need to. Anyways, so yes, prioritize high value stats as soon as you can. It's a pain in the ass to look at every single gear piece you have, but that's how you get to the point where you have the perfect gear and you can kind of just everything's set in stone. You just need to coast on through. Also, you need to break down a ton of shit just to be able to get mods like Bloodlust and things like that. Make sure you're leveling those up to your relevant level, because they're going to increase the mod power itself. But it's kind of double-edged sword, because when you increase your level of your armor, it's going to decrease your bonus firepower, status power, long range damage power back to center essentially. So it'll reset them, but it'll increase your mod scaling. So Bloodlust is doing way more kill firepower essentially than my boots. Right here it's giving me 11, and that's a 3-star mod. And then Bloodlust here is giving me 17s, because this is level 50, and this is level 48. So that two point difference is making a huge difference in how hard this mod scales. And again, it's really, I would always suggest level out the mod. You'll eventually at some point, you'll have an abundance of the diamond, health, cooldown, long range, firepower, scaling shards to just level up everything you want. Again, yeah, look at how many shards I have. I have 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, just about everything. So eventually, if you just grind a lot, you'll get the shards to level up your gear. Again, various things. This one will give me max HP shards. This one will give me close range damage shards. Break down shit. Hope you get lucky with the ones you want. Again, eventually you'll have an abundance of everything. But yes, try to get Dark Sacrifice or the weird radiation shotgun thing that scales up your anomaly damage. Get level up armor, specifically that's good for your ideal build, and look for a set bonus and play into that. I do warn you though, there's a reason why certain builds can survive at endgame and others can't. It's because they kind of find a way to break the rules, or they have something built into their class that just gives them a shit ton of tankiness or a shit ton of damage, or the ability to break both of those rules. Like the Inferno guy can literally just melt the map in one ability press. It's kind of crazy. Anyways, but that is essentially how you progress specifically with the Technomancer in Outriders. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you so much for listening to me ramble and get a little heated, honestly. This game, I think, could use some like tweaking and rebalancing shit, but because I would like to play with other weapons, but maybe I'll just have to drop the world tier and get less legendaries that are not tier efficient. Okay, sure, I guess. Weird, but fine. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to me. We stream a lot on the channel. Hopefully you can tune into one of those streams. Stop by and tell me what build you fancied or chosen to embark on the very long process of finding the best possible attributes. Thank you, and goodbye.